So the next thing to think about in your discussion, so we've thought about intent, and again, if you've not seen that, go and watch the separate video on the notion of intent, is to think about the veracity of your conclusions. In other words, making sure that there is substance to the conclusions that you are making. Now, don't confuse this with the conclusion to the overall study, but you are making conclusions as you go along. You are making statements. So we talked about these statements of intent. Now you've got to kind of give them weight. You've got to show that there is validity in what it is you are stating. So let's think about how you're going to evidence that. Well, the key here is absolutely referencing previously published literature, but fundamentally it has to be relevant. And this is something that was referred to in the introduction short video. So again, if you're not sure about this, go back and watch the videos in relation to the introduction. You only want to be using literature to support your conclusions, your statements, your critiques that is relevant. So in other words, for example, it's perfectly possible that you may be writing a literature section in your discussion. You've got some data which is to do with, say, strength training, and strength testing, and you've measured the strength, and you're trying to show from your data that actually the results are reliable. So you go and do a search, and you find a paper which shows that the grip strength is a reliable test. Okay, and you think, brilliant, that fits. However, unless the paper is using a similar dynamometer, a similar population group, a similar approach, it is not relevant. So although you might have got a study that shows, yeah, it's relevant, but it's from a geriatric population group or it's from a clinical population group, unless you state that that is the case, then it's irrelevant. It doesn't fit for purpose. So we have to use literature that is absolutely pertinent to the argument that we're making, or we need to be absolutely clear in what we're stating as to why it's not completely comparable. And one of the things to take away from this is this. Look, if it was relevant in the introduction, so you've cited it in the introduction, in all likelihood it is absolutely germane to what is happening in the discussion, because you clearly felt that it was important in the discussion, in that kind of setting the themes, moving from that kind of broader approach to the more specialised approach in the introduction. Therefore, it must be relevant to what is going on in the discussion. And that doesn't mean that you can't introduce new references. But clearly, you're trying to tie the whole paper together. So you're trying to connect in the discussion, you're trying to connect your data to your ideas, your aims that were projected in the introduction. So presumably you should be using the same literature. And then the final thing just to bear in mind is, remember to try, where possible, to use more than one reference. This is really important, particularly where you're making a statement which is, there is a lot of evidence, or there are a plethora of evidence, or many studies have shown. If you're writing like that, a single study doesn't really show that that is the case. So provide more than one example. So let's have a read of this in the example. Okay, so here we are in our discussion. So the opening paragraph is about setting the scene, and now we're getting into this, how we draw the conclusions. So we've got the intent here. Previous studies show that across a series of repeat trials, both males, 13.9%, and females, 21%, exhibited highly variable results. Sue, 1994, when performing the manoeuvre from the elevated position. So we're using that to kind of set the scene. So now how do we get to this kind of conclusion? Well, if we scroll down, a confounding issue in the work of Sue et al. 1994 was the choice of dynamometer, JAMA, which has been shown to exhibit weak reliability in population studies. So this is really important, so that we've taken the Sue study because it's working within a similar population group, but they've used a different dynamometer. So in other words, we're drawing out, we're saying it's relevant, but there is areas of concern. However, they've been shown to show weak reliability in population studies. as opposed to the Takai device, and that's what was used in this study, which has yielded stronger scores for reliability in S. Additionally, Su et al. Applied minimal calibration controls, a function of the dynamometer, whereas in the current study, calibration was a function of the dimension of the phalanges. If we go down a little bit here, previous works, Riti-Diaz, have applied a similar methodology to the evaluation of 1RM testing in weightlifters. The data suggests that the RP condition can generate reliable results, while the FE condition less reliable so. So now we start getting into these kind of conclusions again. Possible explanations for this lie in the mode of action. Under full elbow extension, there is a tendency for the participant to adjust the force being applied to the dynamometer. Su, Innes, Clark, and Adams. Now, let's bear in mind that the relevancy of those in terms of the intent and also the connection to what we've stated previously within the report. So if we kind of scroll back to the introduction, and we go into the introduction. So here we go. Little is known about how many trials are needed to familiarise participants. Furthermore, the validity of the test is questioned. So Robertson, through the apparent lack of control for calibration. So there's the connection. Su et al. 1994, a standardisation of manoeuvres, for example, lowering the arm from a raised position opposed to the arm side position. So in other words, straight away, that Su study is the connection, because that is the connection between what we were suggesting might be a gap in the research in the introduction as to what we're making in terms of our conclusions in the discussion. And if we go down a bit further here, previous studies have also suggested that when assessing the 1RM, at least 3 familiarization trials are needed. Riti-Diaz. So again, Riti-Diaz was cited in the discussion in relation to the kind of the veracity of our findings, and there is the connection. So again, it's being used in the correct context. So when you're putting your discussion together, make sure that you are using references that connect your assignations and your ideas in the introduction with what you're writing about and concluding in the discussion, and that they are relevant. Well, they should be, because they're in both sections, but that where possible you're using multiple references to really bring home or drive home the message.